So here is an example of a task-specific rubric. Compose a narrative essay to describe the class visit by local firefighters who described home fire escape plans. So you would have task-specific criteria for judging if the student's able to commence with a recounting of the rationale, follow with a description of 6 elements of the plan, and conclude with at least 3 fire safety statistics. This would be a great rubric to use for students' ability to compose this essay, but these criteria would not be able to be used in future essays unless, of course, you were learning about this exact same topic. So this is fine, but if you are going to be giving students lots of opportunities to create essays, you may want to create a more general type of essay. So another type of rubric is kind of the opposite of that, which is the hyper-general rubric. And some rubrics can be too general. So it might be too difficult to align these types of objectives with any instructional objectives. So just be cautious using these. So, again, general rubrics can be good because you can use them multiple times. But if it's too general, then it might be kind of difficult to align it. So here's an example of that. Describe the class visit by local firefighters. Again, superior content has been arranged in an excellent manner. Content is not adequately organized, or it's in between superior and inferior. And so this can be a problem too, because this just isn't very specific, and so it may be difficult for you to be able to really determine whether or not students have mastered that. You can see it's just very loosely aligned with the task itself. And then the third type of rubric is a skill-focused rubric. So this is probably the best type of rubric, but it's when a specific skill is being measured, pursued instructionally by the teacher. This type of rubric is going to provide more clear instructional support, so you're able to really guide students in the right direction. And of course, because of all these great things, this is what's most recommended. So there are different types of skill-focused rubrics. So here's an example. Compose a narrative essay to describe the class visit. Again, so it's the same topic, but this time, it's a little more general than the first one we looked at, but a lot more specific than the last one. So contains an introduction, body, and conclusion. Content is sequenced logically, chronologically, or in order of importance. So this is the kind of rubric scoring criteria that you could use in any type of essay. And the good thing about that is then students gain an understanding of how to write each time. So if they have the same rubric each time, then you would assume that they're going to make better grades each time because they'll know more what the evaluative criteria is going to be. So there are 5 rules in creating rubrics. The first one is to make sure the skill that you're assessing is significant. So we talked about this earlier in the chapter, but make sure that it is an important skill. The second one is to make certain that all the rubric's evaluative criteria can be addressed instructionally. So you want to be able to teach students how to do it. So you don't want to include something on the rubric that is not something that you're teaching students how to do. The third one is to employ as few evaluative criteria as possible. Again, the book recommends 4 or less. Use your judgment on that. But you don't want to have a lot. It can be overwhelming for you and overwhelming for the students. And then the fourth one is to provide a succinct label for each. And I feel this is something that I have in my rubrics. But like delivery, organization, content, language, something simple like that. You don't want the evaluative skill to be a very lengthy, detailed type of thing. And that way students kind of know what they're focusing on when they're preparing their performance. And then the fifth rule is to match the length of the rubric to your tolerance for detail. So you don't want to have rubrics that are going to be very detailed, very long, very difficult to grade. Maybe you have a long version and a short version, depending on how much time you want to devote to grading, but you don't want to get overwhelmed for sure. So sometimes performances can be scored at a later time if you're having students turn in a project or write an essay. Sometimes, of course, performances are happening live, and so you have to be scoring them during the performance itself. So, you have to keep that into consideration. The rubric may need to be simple enough that you can easily score it. Maybe if it is a live performance, you can take notes or do a video recording so you can easily go back and score it later. So, of course, there are some flaws, some sources of error to consider. You want to keep your scoring reliable and valid. So if your rubric lacks a lot of detail, you may have a problem with the scoring. Make sure that you have specific criteria. In addition, procedural flaws can occur when you feel overwhelmed with a very detailed rubric. Make sure that your grading criteria are manageable. To avoid bias as much as possible by avoiding knowing the students who submit, you don't want to be too easy or too hard in your scoring, and feel free to adjust scores as necessary. Also, teachers may tend to score on the extremes of a rubric or always in the middle. Just take a good amount of time for each student and create a rubric that will allow you to score the criteria well. So I'm going to let you take a look at this and think about what you might do in this situation. And then finally, in this summary slide, performance assessments require students to create original responses. They're real-life situations where students apply their learning, and they can identify lots of different tasks. So be sure that you select tasks that are going to create appropriate inferences for what students know. And be sure that you focus on those most important criteria, that these are criteria you can teach, and be sure to remember the 3 different types of rubrics.